Welcome back to the Foreign Desk. I'm Lisa Daftari. Today's show, Defending America. Not an easy job, but we certainly appreciate the individuals who help us do so. And to help us with this conversation, I want to bring in a good friend and colleague, U.S. Army Reserve Lieutenant Colonel and President of the London Center for Policy Research, Tony Shaffer.
Hey, Lisa. Thank you for having me. Good to be on.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Lots of stuff to cover. I mean, sure. Just this morning, we're listening to President Biden as we were preparing for the program. He's giving a talk right this moment at the State Department. I just heard one of his lines. He said, "We're back. Diplomacy's back." Where were we? We're back.
Yeah, I'm disappointed, to say the least. One of the things that Mike Pompeo did as Secretary of State was the Abraham Accords, which were unheard of. One of the things that Mike did, and look, this is not really well known. Right after Mike became director of CIA, I had a meeting with him. He asked me to come in, and so I thought he was going to talk about intelligence stuff. And he said, "No, tell me about this Arab NATO and how I'm going to Turkey. I want to know your thoughts." It's like, oh, so Mike Pompeo was thinking about diplomacy and how to be successful as the Department of State head when he was still at CIA. So I resent, based on my own personal knowledge and involvement with Mike Pompeo, with the Secretary of State, the fact that Mike did work leading first with diplomacy.
Right.
Same with Rick Grinnell. I worked with Ambassador Grinnell when he was in Germany. And Lisa, nobody abandoned diplomacy. They used diplomacy as a tool as part of our strength of forcing NATO to pay more, of taking a path which decoupled Middle East peace from the Palestinians. Up until the Trump administration, they'd always said, we're not going to seek peace amongst the Arab allies and the Israelis until Palestine is done. Well, that was a simple way of constantly causing a failure of diplomacy, done by people like John Kerry, I might add. So when I see this, I don't even know how to describe the President Biden statement. It is beyond false. And I think what he's saying is we're back in the pandering business of pretending to do diplomacy,
right.
but doing absolutely nothing.
Right, we're back on the podium diplomacy, which,
that's right.
Tony, this is worth a longer conversation than the hour that we have time for. Sure. But it's why is it that the American people don't look and say, well, Trump took us out of Syria and Iraq, and this guy in the first hours is putting us back in. Trump was able to bring the Arab nations closer to Israel with the Abraham Accords. Unheard of. People who have studied the region realize what a tremendous and innovative approach this was. And within the first 48 hours of the Biden presidency, we have a doubling down on giving the Palestinians aid again, the pay-to-slay programs you really are reinforcing terrorism. I mean, why is it that, is this just that the American people just prefer words than actions?
Well, I'd like to believe that's not true. If you actually look at who supported the Trump administration's diplomacy, we're talking about people like Tim Pool, who is not a conservative. And, I watched him, and I kind of look at him as a bellwether of some of the millennials out there who actually lean into understanding what's best for the United States, not simply going with a political philosophy. And I think part of the problem is the media itself. The mainstream media has been completely dishonest and deceptive about what's been going on. And let me cite for you a very simple series of events which went pretty much under the radar, and one of the reasons I know about these is because I was involved. Lisa, one of the things that was most successful about retaking Iraq from ISIS back in 2017, 2018 was something done by Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Joseph Dunford, Fighting Joe Dunford. There was a series on this that I helped produce called Chain of Command with Nat Geo, National Geographic. And what was brilliant about, and by the way, Joe Dunford was picked by President Obama to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Remember this. So during the first 2 years of the Trump administration, Joe Dunford, with a free hand to do what was necessary to win, put together the by, with, and through strategy, which allowed for us to work with our regional allies to not have to redeploy troops, to find a path forward to defeat ISIS, and then begin to sort things out in Syria without, again, us being in the middle. Mm-hmm. Trump maintained Joe Dunford, not because Joe was a Republican, not because he was a Trump person, because he was effective. And one of the things that was notable about this is that the strategy worked. It was what was effective in the Middle East. So President Trump did not act politically to remove Dunford because he was an Obama guy. Dunford was given free hand to do what was necessary. And yet, Lisa, the press never covered this.
No.
And so I'm sitting here from, looking at this as someone who advises a lot of people, trying to do the right thing. But the people who should be reporting and talking about success based on merit, based on what actually the results are, were silent. So that's why I think most Americans don't even understand the fact that the president allowed for these professionals to do their job globally and be effective. And that is a very scary thing.
Yeah, it reminds me what you said of how the September 15th signing of the Abraham Accords was referred to by CNN because of Nancy Pelosi, but referred to by CNN as just a large gathering of people who were not socially distant. That's what it was basically brought down to.
And that is to me akin to propaganda, because it was groundbreaking. Even if you don't agree with the path it took, maybe some on the left still don't agree with the idea of decoupling Palestine from peace. Okay, you can have the disagreement, but you cannot disagree with the fact that the Arabs, major Arab nations, had signed up to put themselves with the Israelis on a path to peace. And I think that was the point that should have been made, and it wasn't.
Tremendous. Exactly. I've actually wanted to invite you on the show for a while, and we've had other segments together when I had my show on Fox and on other panels together. And we've always discussed ISIS, Al Qaeda, and Afghanistan and Iraq and all the different threats to facing our nation. But unfortunately, I should say, now the most pressing national security issues seem to be right here in our nation's capital, starting with the news out of the Pentagon this morning. I wanted you to take a listen to the sound and get your response.
Sure.
If confirmed, I will fight hard to stamp out sexual assault and to rid our ranks of racist and extremists, and to create a climate where everyone fit and willing has the opportunity to serve this country with dignity.
For those who may have missed this news this morning, this is Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who has come out and said we have a stand down order for the entire U.S. military for the next 60 days. And of course, this being in reaction to the events that took place at the Capitol on January 6th. It's not an awful thing to, rid the military or anybody of racism and extremism, but it seemed like he's really just referring to one particular group of people, right?
Yeah. He is, unfortunately. Now, let me be very clear. I retired in 2011, and notably, a brigadier general named Lloyd Austin provided my Bronze Star. He approved my Bronze Star in Afghanistan. I actually worked for General Austin. I was the human support element under him in Bagram. This is in my book, Operation Dark Heart. So I've worked for the man. And whatever he's talking about now did not exist in the time when I worked for the man back in 2003, nor when I retired in 2011. And so I'm dubious of the existence of it now. I don't know how, after 8 years of President Obama and 4 years of President Trump, all of a sudden we have a problem with racism. I don't know.
I think he's referring to the extreme. I think when he says extremism, coupling it with the word racism, because that's just a buzzword these days, obviously.
Yes.
But when he's saying extremism, he's certainly referring to the veterans who participated in the protests on January 6th. I mean, what's your reaction to that?
I think it's again, I'm just going to have to say it, propaganda. Look, I was there in the crowd with a number of my board members from the London Center It's on my social media. And to summarize it, it was very carnival-like. People were very bright. It was very much a celebration. And one of the notable things, Lisa, and I encourage folks to go back and check the timeline, a lot of these things started before President Trump had even stopped speaking. President Trump stopped speaking at about 1:15. We all decided that, we're going home. Everybody had their celebration. And so the crowd wasn't spun up. And so I do look at this comment from General Austin, the new Secretary of Defense, as akin to attempting a version of political suppression of a point of view the left does not agree with. And I need to be careful here, because I don't want to say something out of turn regarding his remarks. I'd like to see more. I'd like to learn more about what his intentions are before I criticize him. With that said, it was very clear in 2017 that the Obama administration permitted the Department of Justice to go off on political witch hunts regarding the Russian narrative. So it's been very clear that the Democrats are more than willing to invoke and use official tools of government oversight to essentially target those they disagree with politically. This is very dangerous.
Very dangerous.
So that's what I see here, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. Very, very parallel situation. When you take a certain narrative and you take from that, well, I need to invoke A, B, and C because of this result. We're going to have racism. We're going to have extremism, and expect everyone to hop on board, because who's going to fight that?
Right.
And in the meantime, my concern when I was reading this story this morning is this is just another continuation of really belittling men and women in uniform. And we've had that across the board, whether it's the police or, the military, the way that we saw the footage of them sleeping on the streets, the way that, they've been treated.
So the military, in my judgment, becomes essentially a prop in a larger play, a political play to the left all the time. I mean, I've read accounts about how badly the National Guard troops have been treated and politicized. I mean, two governors, Rick DeSantis and the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, pulled their National Guard units home because of the blatant disrespect and political football game they were thrown in the middle of. And then, by the way, I've been to DC. There's no threat. It's really amazing that you've had political leaders now choose to military. DC looks more like Moscow than DC ever has, with all these fences, with all these guards. And I think it's a dangerous, and I think it's all about trying to set a certain perception about a certain segment of the political landscape threatening the city. There's no threat. There's no threat. And I live in Northern Virginia, and I see what goes in and out of that city. And I'm telling you, Lisa, this is all a hoax. There's no threat that these guys are lined up against. It's using the military as a political pawn to create a certain perception is what's going on.
Well, then I'd love to get your reaction on another piece of news that broke this week. Is there's a new order that extends the National Guard deployment through the end of March. We're at the beginning of February, and they've been there since before the inauguration. What's their calculation? Do they think something's going to happen in the aftermath of impeachment trials, or what are they thinking?
I think they're, again, trying to create a specific narrative that meets what they want people to think. This goes back to the original question you had regarding why didn't the media pay attention to all this great diplomacy? Same thing now. They didn't want you to look at that, but they want you to look at this. Look at the bright, shiny thing. Look at all these troops. Look at what we're being forced to do. Oh my, this is terrible. We have to be very specific about having all these forces on hand. Lisa, this is a very Stalinistic tactic to create in the minds of the American people that there's an other out there about to attack. And that other is anybody the left disagrees with. I think that's the safe thing to say. Anybody who disagrees with the left, they're racist. It doesn't matter if you're black or Asian, you're a racist because you disagree with us. Right. And I think that's what's going on here with the military. They're trying to create a perception saying that, oh, we are forced because of this threat to have the military here. And there's no such thing. I think it's, again, using the military inappropriately for purposes of trying to create a political perception.
Yeah, and in that, there's such a danger in creating this environment here in the United States where half the country hates the other half. They can't,
right.
not only hates. I mean, we have different points of view, and traditionally we've respected the other side. And you wait 4 years until you can have another election, so you can. But it's really, like you said, it's such an enemy that you have to rid it. The way you have to rid, anti-Semitism or racism. You want to rid this type of thinking, and
right.
with that, we're almost making it seem like, conservatives are scarier than ISIS. Conservatives are scarier than Hezbollah. And, that's going to create, in my mind, and I'm sure, you'd agree with this, it's going to create for the next 4 years a real dangerous blind spot with regards to our national security.
That's true. So, well, at least let's be clear on this. Chuck Norris is more frightening than ISIS. Just saying, but as an individual. But on a serious note, back to our serious discussion, this is what they're trying to seek. They're trying to essentially create a uniform perception that anybody on the conservative side is somehow engaged in extreme behavior. That's what it is. It's trying to create the idea of extreme behavior. And look no further than Miss Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, working hard to create a narrative which backs this up. Some of you, if you follow my Twitter feed, I've been all over this because she flat out lied. She tried to portray all these MAGA folks, these conservatives, coming in and seeking her out in now what we know to be a completely fictional account of what happened on the 6th of January. The reason she's doing that, Lisa, is because she and others are trying to coordinate this larger campaign to say all conservatives are radicals. Anybody who supported the president is a radical. They must now be cleansed from the political landscape.
Right.
Gee, I remember there was a leader back in the 1930s who started using that rhetoric, talking about cleansing as well. And it didn't work out too well for Germany. So, but I see parallels here between what they're trying to create regarding this narrative.
Yeah, but Tony, the Nazis are on the right, not on the left, right?
Well, what's interesting is that the techniques that I've seen the left pick up and use are very much akin to what Stalin used regarding the use of information to create perceptions regarding the Soviet people, as well as some of the things. And I'm not calling the Democrats Nazis. Let's be clear here, so nobody gets upset and writes you notes. I'm saying that some of the techniques that the Nazis used to create perceptions has now been picked up and is being utilized by some elements. And again, I'm not going to do what the Democrats do. I'm not saying all the Democrats are doing this. I'm saying some, what I would call the neoprogressives on the left are doing this because I know conscientious Democrats. I correspond with a few who are as mortified. I don't want to name any former members of Congress who've called their own side out, but I'm telling you right now, some of their own side is calling them out for this abhorrent
Absolutely,
behavior.
and as they should. If they truly are preaching unity, unity is going to come from within on both sides.
Right.
To look at your own party and say, what can we do so that the old guard and the new guard can have a unified, message? So Schumer, Pelosi, they need to be, reining in the Ilhan Omars and the AOCs out there and saying, look, this is not the way it is,
Right.
And it's they have such a feeling of entitlement. I mean, you have a seat in Congress. I mean, look at Ilhan Omar, AOC, likewise, that actually hate this country. And I say that, I mean, yeah, they're serving, right? And it seems like they don't realize the honor, the prestige that comes with serving, and continuously bashing. You can criticize this country because that's what makes us better, but to continuously, speak badly about law enforcement, they're the same people who are keeping you safe outside so that you can tell your sob story about being afraid at the Capitol where you were not. So I think it just goes, how far will this go to really change the narrative and the landscape of what America is?
That's what I don't know. And I have a political science degree, and I came up, my course of study was focused primarily on two areas, as international politics, international relations, and American politics. And I've done a lot of, you might laugh at this, I've done a lot of reviewing the basic political atmosphere of 1860 and 1861, before the Civil War, and what resulted in this bifurcation of society, and a lot of the extreme views of differences of opinion of how we should proceed as a country, which existed then, exists now. We have people who want to be free. I went up to West Virginia and Pennsylvania and Western Virginia a few days ago. And let me tell you, Lisa, the people living in those areas they're not in sync with Philadelphia. Exactly. They're not in sync with New York. They're not in sync with DC. And, I went up, full disclosure, I went up to, one of the things I did was in Pennsylvania, got my concealed carry permit. I'm a big Second Amendment guy. So as I was going through and talking to the folks in line with me, it's like, yeah, we're very concerned about the direction of our nation, and we don't necessarily think that things are going to go peacefully. And I'm not saying we're heading to civil war. I'm saying the discord we currently have has a very, very clear divide between what people see in the cities and the progressive side versus what they call flyover country sees as the best direction for the country. And I don't know where this is going, to be honest with you. And I spend a lot of time trying to get a pulse, because my job as a national security think tank is try to advise those who are willing to listen on what the best policy is to proceed to keep the country together. And I don't have any answers yet. And you probably, I recommend we have this conversation about 3 months from now. Maybe I'll have a better idea.
Yeah, no, well, I brought you on because you have such a perspective in both internally and externally, looking at the threats that we face as Americans, and looking at different parts of the world where they have had internal turmoil and then external. Often, people will rally around the flag over a threat. What do you think? And there's a long list of nations that were very happy to see Joe Biden elected and Donald Trump leaving. That's a message in and of itself, right? Yeah. What do you think will be the biggest foreign policy challenge for the Biden administration? And do you think it will bring Americans together?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I think there are 3 regions that is going to give President Biden problems, and three threats within those regions that we're going to have to deal with. First, let's just go through the regions. China has essentially already moved forward with trying to insinuate its momentum to creating its Pacific Rim dominance, and then ultimately global. And I hate to sound like someone in a James Bond movie, shouting out about an evil empire growing, but China is, and this is in their military doctrine.
Understand, what is China's goal?
China's goal, very simply, is dominance of the globe. The very principles which govern the way they run the People's Republic of China. Remember, they are communists. They see that as the method that the world should run, that they believe that they, as the communists, are smarter than everybody else. And they've done this through what we call soft power. Soft power, where they go into an African country and, hey, we're going to build a dam for you, build a power plant. And during the time they're doing all this great humanitarian work, they're subverting the government. They're actually putting people in place. They're spending all this money and resources. They can afford to do that. So it's more about how do they dominate the globe one country at a time through soft power. Now, they've become a lot more bellicose. They've talked about being much more militant in doing this. And again, this is them using communism and this soft power to reinvoke essentially a very big form of nationalism. The Chinese, Lisa, people overlook this. The Chinese are more nationalistic than they are communistic at this point. Yes, they're communists, but they're much more focused on trying to reinsinuate themselves as a national force. And what basically we did for years ago, I worked for Boeing Phantom Works on this, and we did something called the Inside Out study, where we examined through the intelligence lens what, you know, we pretended to be China, and the answer that we came to the conclusion of, China is not looking to be communist; they're looking to be nationalist. They feel that their country is older than all the other countries on the world. They think, you know, why should we follow your rules? Our rules are older than yours. So this is much more about the Chinese insinuating themselves in such a way to say that we should be the ones, more than the United States or any other nation, that dominates the world. And while I am not a neocon, I am not for the idea of us dominating the world. I do believe the United States has been more fair in trying to be an arbiter of what's best for the planet, because we do have certain principles that guide our work. And let me tell you something. I think our work to maintain markets, our work to maintain equilibrium for nations to be able to rise, is just that. It's about fairness. It's about democratic principles. The Chinese, the PRC, will have no such interests should they become successful in creating the dominance of the planet that they're seeking to insinuate on everyone.
Right. And the other two?
So Russia. I think Russia is going to be a challenge because you know, the Russians are going to go back on doing what Russians do. Victoria Nuland, those diplomats, look, they're already going to do things to undermine Ukraine's sovereignty. So I think we're going to see another crisis where the Russians and Ukraine are facing off because of Biden's feckless policies. And then we're also going to see...
Let's stop at Russia for a
Sure.
moment. What do you think about Blinken's move to get right back into the START treaty with zero conditions, leverage? I mean, they didn't use any of the leverage we had on that expiring treaty. Thoughts?
Yeah. I think we're going to be deferring to Russia. People don't recognize, Lisa, that President Trump did more to create more problems for Russia than any president has in a long time. He actually forced the Russians to live up to treaty obligations or end them. We left the INF treaty for the right reasons. We were prohibited from creating a whole range of intermediate range nuclear weapons by the treaty, and the Russians just did it. It's like, yeah, we're just going to do it. Well, you can't do that. Well, you know, we're going to do it, but we expect you to stick with the treaty. No. So President Trump walked away from that. So that's what I'm saying, is that we, if we saw we weren't benefiting from it, or the Russians weren't living up to it, it was ended. And so the idea that Biden's going to jump back in there with no conditions, saying, oh, no, we're going to re-up, it doesn't make any sense. One of my friends and mentors, by the way, Lisa, is Bud McFarlane, President Reagan's former national security advisor, and another Ambassador Hank Cooper, who was one of his senior negotiators on these treaties that were created. And I'm telling you right now, there was always a tit for tat. If you do this, we expect this. There was always a negotiation from strength.
I mean, don't we get that from childhood? Like, you're not going to give all your cookies and not get any snack in exchange.
Right. So the fact that within not even 2 weeks, he's given in to the Russians, it's not a good sign. So that's what I'm saying. The Ukraine issue, Katie barred the door. I think if I were in Ukrainian leadership right now, I'd be very worried. So I think the Russia thing is problematic. And, you know, there was all this talk about foreign interference. Trust me, the Russians didn't want Trump reelected. I don't know where that all came from. And you know, while I don't believe for a minute the Russia collusion thing, I don't believe for a minute the Russians were supporting Trump because I think they see greater benefit from a Biden administration. And then the last area is simply the Middle East. I think we're going to see a lot of resurgence of terror groups. ISIS, I think, is going to reinsinuate itself in certain areas where we don't have political will to go in and deal with it. I think there's a good chance we're going to see new conflicts based on the fact that Biden seems unable to resist the idea of sending troops into Syria. I think if we send troops into Syria, we're going to see a larger conflict ensue in the region. And I just don't see that area maintaining stability, especially when they reopen their relationship with the Iranians.
Right.
I think one of the things that happened under Obama is that our Arab allies, and again, I'm not trying to justify anything the Saudis do. I'm not saying that I support Saudi Arabia or some of their more extreme issues. Trust me, I am anti-Saudi when it comes to women's issues and some of the ways they do things. But I'm saying as a practical matter, the United States made a policy decision a long time ago to align itself with the Sunni Arabs, not the Shia. And so the idea of warming back up to the Shia, the Iranians, I don't think is going to go well for regional stability.
Right. And I think he's going to have a lot of pushback based on the modern or moderate Arab countries that have signed on to the Abraham Accords.
Absolutely.
That have done so for many reasons, one of which being to curb the Sunni, influence from Iran as well. But I think you bring up a great point. We're living in a time, and Donald Trump was actually very, very good at this because he was a deals and a negotiating kind of guy.
Right.
To not look at people or nations as our allies, but on policy issues only. So I can collaborate with you on this, but I can call you out on this.
Right.
And I think that is, really the way to go. We can say that Saudi Arabia has issues with many things, human rights being one of them, but definitely to collaborate on them with the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and to see if we will get back into the Iran deal. You wear many hats. Obviously, you have a tremendous military background, tremendous knowledge as a consultant, and obviously with the London Center. But my favorite part of your bio is where it says on Twitter that you're a snarky bastard. I've never seen that come through. Maybe a little bit today with some of your jokes, but let's get back to the more serious stuff.
Sure.
I think you're working on a very, very important topic, something that I've covered for many years, but I haven't heard much about it as of late, and that's FGM, female mutilation, which still goes on in many parts of the world, and people don't realize this. And you are coming out with a report on this imminently at the London Center. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, to give explanation, because I think your audience is going to see we're all over the map today, and the London Center, we're not so much all over the map, but we do try to focus on two specific areas of interest that I think everybody should understand. First is collective security. Most of what we've talked about so far, Lisa, is about our collective security as a nation and the allies we work with to help make sure that this is strong. The other thing we do is individual security, the ideas of individual liberty. And one of the things that Dr. London, my boss, Herb London, before he passed, was big on was the Bill of Rights and the idea of American exceptionalism. And people misinterpret American exceptionalism all the time. It's not about us being better than the world. It's about the fact that anybody in the world can come here and be better, that you can come here and be American. That's the exceptionalism. And when you get here, you have the freedom to exist, to be secure in your person, and to thrive. And that's why we cover this wide range of things, to include this female genital mutilation issue, which now has come up. So a couple of days ago, Scott Perry, Representative Scott Perry, Congressman Scott Perry, contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm doing a bill, Save Our Girls Act, which focuses on basically to making sure that it is a criminal act, that is a federal criminal act for anyone to engage in female genital mutilation." Believe it or not, there's been some cases in this. I think it was in Kansas, or it was in Michigan, where a doctor engaged in this. And even though it was against the law, the court said, "Oh, this is protected by religion." It's like, excuse me? You have the right to mutilate a child because of a religious belief? It's bad. So what Scott is trying to do, what Congressman Perry is trying to do, is establish legislation which does three things. First, makes it a federal crime to engage in that behavior, that is something that clearly is well defined as a criminal act. Secondly, it makes it reportable so that people actually get a sense of how big this is. This, in my judgment, and according to, Scott and I did a discussion on this yesterday on our Thought to Action podcast where we talk about this. This is underreported. This happens way more than people understand. And because, people say, oh, we don't see it. Yeah, you don't see it because it's not going to be bragged about. And those who actually observe it, who are medical professionals, aren't required to report it. Well, they need to report it. And it needs to be documented as a crime in the FBI crime data analysis. So that's the second thing it does. It makes it very clear. And third, for those who are victimized by this, I don't know if you knew this, Lisa, did you know if you were victimized by this, you can't get federal support, that this is not considered something worthy of one of those grant programs that women have available to them when they're victimized? Did you know that?
I did not know that.
This was something I had no idea about. But this also then opens up all these federal programs, these grants and other protective programs to women who suffer this horrible event. So that's what's in this new act. And so it's very timely. As a matter of fact, Scott is dropping that today. This is going into Congress. And
I hope the young women of Congress, AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, I hope that they're listening, because these are real human rights issues that are worthwhile, and a platform that young women should really support if they have the voice to do so.
Well, let me ask you that question, Lisa. I hope you don't mind. I turn the tables here for a second. How is it that people like those women don't see this as an issue? I mean, right. I see this because I want to be fair. I think it's terrible. But how is it the women you just mentioned don't seem to be all that, concerned about this?
Yeah, because, it's exactly, to go back to our first question, why the media doesn't pick up on a lot of these things going forward. You said, there's going to be an emergence of ISIS. There will be, all of these stories will be minimalized, totally washed by the media, because it doesn't support the narrative. And these human rights cases are just on the periphery because they don't want to give attention to something that is outside of their very narrow scope, which they promote. I've always said this. I mean, where are they on the women of Iran that come out without their hijab and are imprisoned?
Right.
Where are they on all of these various stories, on honor killings right here in the United States? We don't even need to go as far as the Middle East. Right here in the United States. You have Ms. Tlaib, who is from Michigan. I mean, this is her state where a lot of these cases are taking place. So I think there should be much more pressure on their constituents to follow these cases, to report these cases, to highlight these cases. People like yourself and myself have to stay with it, and to bring it to their attention, because really, I think there's never been a better time for think tanks and independent journalists like us to have a voice. And there is such a mistrust on by the mainstream media, and I think that because of that, there is a void that should be filled, and these are the stories that have to be covered.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more. And thank you for bringing it up.
And thank you. Yeah, thank you for doing such great work. Herb London was a good friend. He supported, the Foreign Desk and my work, always sent me little lines to let me know that he's reading my stuff, and really meant a lot to me to watch him as a mentor, somebody who was really a large figure and big shoes to fill. And thank you for stepping up and continuing his wonderful work and his legacy.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for your kind words. And they're tough shoes, but I'll continue to do my best. I always try to before I make a decision, I always ask myself, what would Herb do? So I do try to do my best.
Tell people where they can find your snarkiness online.
So I'm T-Spooky on Twitter and on the other social media Gab and some of the other ones. If Parler comes back, I'm T-Spooky on that. And then you can check out our work on londoncenter.org. We have a good summary of everything we're doing. We're doing an accountability center. We've got a Second Amendment center. We're reopening a lot of our work on trying to find ways to work. I'm working with the Association of British Muslims in England, trying to look at how we can stop Islam from being radical, trying to de-radicalize it. And then also we have a podcast, Thought to Action, which I'd like to invite you to come over and do a segment on at some point, maybe on the topic of the Save Our Girls Act at some point. Thought to Action is on YouTube. So people can go over and look at our I think we'd probably do 2 or 3 of those a week just to keep people informed of what we're doing. So, but again, Lisa, thank you for having me. I hope we don't wait another 6 years before we get back together again.
Exactly right. It was wonderful having you on. And for those of you who'd like to subscribe to our podcast, go to youtube.com/Lisa Daftari. And to sign up for our daily top 10 email, go to our website, foreigndesknews.com/newsletter, and you can sign up there. Till next time, thank you and be well.